Good evening and welcome to the second in a series of forums with candidates for office for this November 5th elections that are being brought to you by the Cayuga Community College and the Citizen as a co-sponsor. These are shown on Spectrum, Verizon, Fios, ARMA, the Auburn Regional Media Access, and played on the college's radio station WDWN 89.1. I'm your moderator, Guy Cosentino. On November 5th, the voters in the 10th Legislative District for the Cayuga County Legislature will go to the polls and pick someone new to represent them. Legislator Joe Bennett has decided not to seek re-election, so this is one of the two open seats there are on the legislature this fall. The 10th District is located in the northwest corner of the city of Auburn. The position of a member of the county legislature is a part-time position, and its base pay is $13,500 per year. The 15-member legislature has 8 Republicans and 6 Democrats and 1 independent. With just short of half of the legislature up this year and several competitive races, this year could decide if there's a shift in control of the legislature from Republican to Democrat, reversing a change about a year ago when the two Democratic legislators changed their party registration. Representing the press today, as he has for 14 or 15 years, we're still trying to figure that out, is Jeremy Boyer, the executive editor of The Citizen. Mr. Boyer will be asking questions of both candidates who we have here. Prior to the taping of this show, the candidates drew lots to see what order they would be going in for their 2-minute openings. The order will be reversed at the end for their closing statements. Our candidates in the order of how they will be speaking are Heidi Nightengale, who's on the Democratic and Working Families Party, and Edward Darrow, who's on the Republican, Conservative, and Independent lines. Welcome into this studio, and thanks for taking part in this forum. We'll start with opening statements, and we'll start with Heidi Nightengale, who is on the Democratic and Working Families lines. Welcome.
Welcome, and thank you, Guy. I've spent 30 years in human services field in Auburn, and my neighbors and I in District 10 have many things in common. The desire for a good quality of life, concerns about the opiate crisis and the public safety issues inherent, and the human toll on life, the largest density of abandoned homes, zombie homes in the city, and the lack of a district-directed economic development plan. I've been a resident of District 10 for 26 years. I moved into the community after my first job, director of the neighborhood house. I chose to live in District 10. I'm running for legislature with a desire to utilize my community advocacy, organizational building, budgeting experience to increase the well-being of working families in my district. As the daughter of a union truck driver and one of 7 siblings, I was the first in my family to attend college. As a student, I cleaned the bathrooms of the trucking terminal where my father worked to earn a tank of gas. I have held a lifelong understanding of hard work. I've spent life in Cayuga County working with youth and families to overcome problems related to the issues I noted earlier. Before beginning to teach at SUNY Empire here on the campus, I was one of the team of members who created the Safe Schools, Healthy Students Initiative, and as deputy director, I had oversight of $1 million budget. That program brought our SROs and the county SWAT team to fruition, and we worked to provide the best practice trainings from the Department of Justice for these community safekeepers. I'm proud to say that these initiatives still exist 17 years later. My fiscal skills, both public and private, will be something I use to promote the need for careful, conscientious decision-making involving taxpayer dollars and promote efficient and effective government as a priority for my district and the county.
Thank you, Ms. Nightengale. We'll now hear from Mr. Darrow, who's on the Republican, Conservative, and Independent Party lines. Mr. Darrow, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Ed Darrow, and I'm running for county legislator in District 10, which I have resided in since 1972. I am married to Annette Carner Darrow, and this month we will celebrate 27 years. We have 2 grown children, Morgan and Nicole. I run Central New York Pool Service, which I have operated for 32 years very successfully. I am running for county legislator because I feel it's time that we run the county like a business. We need to look at where spending goes wrong. We need to tighten our belts and be fiscally responsible. I also feel with 26 years on the Zoning Board of Appeals This will be a great asset to help me navigate through county government. In the past 12 years on Zoning Board of Appeals, I have been board chairman. I was also appointed to the Sparks Auburn Board as an advisor by Mayor Quill. I have a few goals in county government, some of them being to help lessen the tax burden on our taxpayers, to help cut our costs using joint services and through updating technology. And one, of course, is to watch over our watershed, to keep track of our lakes and its tributaries that come into it. I feel they are of our greatest importance, and we have to take care of our waterways. And of course, I feel that it's important that I become a legislator to all, meaning that I want to be able to reach across the aisle and work with Democrats, conservatives, all who are in the legislature, the independents. I feel we need to work as a team and come up with a plan. And I feel we need to hold those who are accountable to their positions, department heads and others in the government, because I feel accountability matters, and that's where it must end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Darrow. We'll now have questions from Mr. Boyer. He will can direct them to either of you or both. If it's for both, we'll switch back and forth as we go. Mr. McCrae is our timekeeper. He's a student here in his second year at the college. He'll keep you on the straight and narrow so that you keep it to 2 minutes or less. We'll start with Mr. Boyer. Welcome.
All right. Well, thanks for coming, and appreciate you making time to answer some questions, hopefully inform voters about the differences between your two campaigns and when they can start going into voting booths on whatever date that would be.
Saturday the 26th.
26th, then they'll feel ready to make that decision. But I'd like to start with kind of drilling into the district because Auburn's 10th district is a unique district in the county, really, in terms of its some of the challenges with infrastructure and old building stock, and just some of the socioeconomic demographics of that district. So I'd like to start with a general question for both candidates, and that's really just in terms of county government interacting with the 10th district. The question would just be, how can county government best serve the residents of the 10th district, and how would you go about helping to ensure that?
Ms. Nightengale, you'll have 2 minutes on that.
That's a wonderful question, and as I've met my neighbors over the last few months, there's a lot of things I've learned in addition to living in the district. We have a very ready and available economic development opportunity through places like the industrial park, where the legislature could help to bring in more business. We also have a very thriving and vibrant cottage industry sort of business happening in homes. I've met neighbors who are running child care centers, who are running small businesses that are digital or computer-based, craft-based, and they could utilize the education and services of CETA, which are also part of county programs that could help them. And I have found that they have little information about that, so educating would be important. We are a district of great poverty. We have a poverty rate that can't be pinned down through the census district-wise, but the most important way to find that is through our elementary school. The Casey Park Elementary School has a 76% free and reduced lunch percentage, with 69% of those students being families of people who are on Medicaid and receiving food stamps. So we know that we have a very poor, working poor population in our county, and I think helping them to access services, increase and widen the net of services that are available within the budget and without increasing tax caps is very important to District 10.
Thank you, Ms. Nightengale. Mr. Darrow, on the issue of interacting between the 10th district and the county legislature.
Well, I feel this is one of the areas where I would excel and why I'm uniquely qualified. When you look at our district and how diverse it is with recreation, industry, housing, the city of Auburn is currently divided up into 11 or 12 zoning districts. Our district, District 10, actually comprises 7 different zoning districts. There is no other legislative district in the city that has more than 2 or 3. So you need somebody who has the experience at City Hall with planning and with other economic development means that can work from the county and work with the city to bring these different means to the people who understand what's going on, who understands the diversity, who understands the diverse businesses in our neighborhood to help bring back some of our vacant properties, some of our empty business storefronts to help rejuvenate the district and facilitate what needs to be done to bring more tax base back to our district.
Thank you, Mr. Darrow. Mr. Boyer.
And, to further along this discussion, one of the ways you serve your district, obviously, is to stay in touch with the people of the district, with the constituents. So I'd like to hear from both of you, your plans, your thoughts on how you would go about that part of the job of staying in touch. I mean, I know right now you're out there doing it door to door, and that's I don't know if you could do that every day of the year for 4 years, but what are some other ways you think you would try to employ that constituent feedback and back and forth?
Mr. Darrow, you'll have 2 minutes on this as well.
I feel it's very important to stay in touch with the constituents because while knocking doors, I've heard from past legislators or from constituents that some past legislators may not have always been there as often or listened as often as they should have. So I currently have a Facebook page for the election. And it's my plans to, of course, keep that running and to make sure those who are able to communicate via that do communicate with me. Also having if I'm lucky enough to be, or fortunate enough to be elected, have my county email address and phone number because I think it's important that you hear back from them because you can't serve them adequately unless you're in touch with them and they can get in touch with you. And I feel that's the most important part of the job because that is who you represent, truly. You are representing your contingency and the taxpayers who put you there. And that's the important part. So you cannot just have one way for them to communicate. You need several ways because not one way works for all.
Thank you, Mr. Darrow. Ms. Nightengale, on the issue of communicating with your constituents both ways.
When I've been meeting with my neighbors, one of the things that I have been telling them is that I am committed to continuing or actually initiating 10 town halls in the 3 precincts so that I can continue to meet with them directly just as I have at the doors. That's something that is innovative and has not happened in the district and I think has not happened much around other county legislative districts at all. But I am a known leader in District 10 and they are excited about the opportunity to continue to have listening sessions once and if I am legislator. Also, my phone number, my personal phone number is available to all. It is on my palm card. I want my constituents to be able to contact me directly, and that will be true even when I am or if I am the legislator, not only the phone number that is listed on the Cayuga County legislative site, but my phone number will be available to them, as well as welcoming them to my home. I have had a meet and greet with my neighbors over the summer as part of my campaign, which was very successful. It was wonderful to have a group of neighbors to meet and greet with rather than politicians and donators.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Boyer.
All right. I'd like to ask you both about the person you're replacing, legislator Joe Bennett. just because he's represented the district for a number of years. He's been elected a couple of times, so people know what they have in him. And I assume you're familiar with him. I don't know if you know him personally or not, but just in terms of his service or his work in that job, compare and contrast yourself with him. How would you be like Joe? How would you be different than Joe?
Okay, we'll go with Heidi Nightengale first.
I appreciate the long tenure that Joe has given to public service in District 10. I think that I am different from Joe in that I am very present in the community, very present now, and very present and will be very present as a part of my responsibilities as a legislator in future. One of the things that I have done to sort of walk the walk of being known and present in my community is that 2 years ago, without any fanfare, I put up a little free library from the national organization in my front lawn. And that immediately created a sense of vitality among my neighbors. I live in an area where parents and families, adults, don't have transportation or don't necessarily have the ability to get to Seymour Library. And that little library, which has a shelf for adults and a shelf for children, not only has vitalized the neighborhood and given children and adults a chance to read, but it has become a gathering place for talking in the neighborhood.
Thank you. Mr. Darrow, compare and contrast yourself with Joe Bennett.
Yes, Joe Bennett and I are fairly good friends. We've known each other a number of years. His father and my father were good friends. Joe and I share similar qualities, yet we do differ in other ways. Joe is, as I see him, fiscally conservative. He's a good watchdog. I think he's done a very, very good job on the county legislature. I am extremely proud to have his support and his endorsement to fill his seat. I'm very proud of that because of the job he's done. I see how hard Joe worked to repurpose the neighborhood house and to get the daycare center in there for the college. He worked hard on that, which I think was a wonderful thing to do. Where we differ, I think I have my entire life of being a business owner. It's all I've done. And I feel running a business is what is going to help me make a good legislator, because you have to understand good, poor, and really good business decisions. And that's what it's about. When you're running the legislature and you're doing a budget, there are things you can do without, there are things you have to have, and then there are some things that are just, well, on the wish list. And you have to understand that. And when you run a business, you're spending your own money, and when you're a county legislator, you're spending the taxpayers' money. It should be no different than spending your own money. You have to look at it in that sense. You're spending your own money when you're spending the taxpayers' money. And that's where I think another way where Joe and I are very much alike.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer.
I'd like to, you've both touched a little bit on economic development, and I'd like to get your thoughts on the county's model, the Cayuga Economic Development Agency, being the sort of the starting point of those efforts. That CETA has a contract with the city and county IDAs to administer their programs, and then it's funded each year in the county budget. We've had it, Guy probably knows better than me, 10 years or so,
10 years.
roughly. So I'd like you to just evaluate that model. How is it working, especially for your district?
I believe this goes to Mr. Darrow first.
Well, in my district, we've recently had a building on York Street repurposed, and for lack of a better term, I'll call it a micro distillery is going to be going in, and that had some economic help. I think when you look at the money spent through the economic development agencies and their different programs, it's always money well spent, because another aspect, coming from business, you have to spend a nickel to make a dime. And whenever you're spending money and you're getting more money in return, it pays off. Whether it's paying off in jobs, new taxes, it's paying off. And that's what's important, because we need the growth. We need the jobs. We need the tax growth. And so we have a strong city and county economic development agency. It's just, I think, too many people don't understand what's there and may have trouble navigating to it. And I think it's just getting the message out of what is available and what they can do for you and how we can revitalize more areas of District 10, and why limit to District 10, but the city, the county. It's getting the word out and keeping things going, keep the ball rolling.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Darrow. Ms. Nightengale, on the issue of economic development in CETA.
I'm very proud to see what kind of economic development has occurred over the past several years in District 10. There is a sense of revitalization bubbling up in a very shining kind of way, and CETA has been a very important part of that. I would completely support, as a legislator, that we continue to support the work and fund the work of CETA, because as Mr. Darrow said, every piece of time and money that goes into that kind of development is only going to increase in terms of job development and community revitalization. So I have a strong support for CETA and understand and know that as a legislator, I would be responsible for helping to spread the work and word and education around CETA.
Okay, thank you. Anything to follow up? Or no? Okay. Mr. Boyer.
All right. Well, let's go into a few questions about county leadership and the struggle to keep a county administrator that we've had here for about a decade. It started off with the first question going back to the spring when Justin Woods was terminated as the county administrator. The legislature, not unanimously, but they took a vote and moved on from Mr. Woods. And we got a little bit of explanation, not a ton, but in general, what was your sense as as people that were at that point candidates? Did you feel like that was the right move to make at the time, and why or why not?
And I believe this starts with Ms. Nightengale.
Well, the revolving door of administrators has to stop. It's expensive, it's disruptive, it's frustrating, and frankly embarrassing to everyone. So I think we all agree on this. So what do? I don't have an easy answer or a quick answer for this. I've not been on the legislature and don't know all the conversations, the meetings, and the nuances around what has happened with this particular administrator and the others who have left quickly as well. What I know is that I will bring the skills and expertise as an experienced leader and administrator to help with the problem. I'll work with my colleagues to move us into a more positive direction. So I don't think the issues changes. We need to stop the revolving door. We need to understand that the county is a big company and needs skilled and focused leadership. How do we do that best? I'm going to use my experience to help answer that question as a legislator.
Okay. Mr. Darrow, you'll have 2 minutes on this issue of the revolving door.
I've been doing my best to make it to every legislative meeting and the committee meetings. I know my opponent wasn't at that meeting. That meeting was held up at the lake. It was one of their special recognition dinners for members of our SVP. They went into executive session, so I'm not privy to the details afterwards of the dismissal, but a lot of the meetings leading up to that, because I've been making the legislative and the committee meetings from about February, March onward, most everything I can make, because I want to be up to speed if I'm elected legislator. I want to know what's going on. I want to be able to jump right in with both feet and lead the district. As far as our administrator goes, I think there were some personality conflicts. I haven't really decided yet if the county administrator is the way to go, or if we should go perhaps to a county executive, which would take a referendum, or even go back to the chairman of the legislature running it. But I think a lot of it had to do with maybe a little too much micromanaging, maybe not enough leeway in allowing him to do his job. So being that I really wasn't in that executive session to know what their real reason was, it's hard to give a true opinion because I don't have all the facts, and I never, ever rush to judgment, ever, without having the facts. Whether it's a decision on the zoning board or any other decision on any other board I sit on, we have to have the facts to make an educated decision.
Ms. Nightengale, did you want to follow up, or no? I wasn't.
No follow-up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Boyer.
The next question, and I know it goes to Mr. Darrow because it's for both, but you alluded to the choices of the, where we go from here as far as the type of day-to-day leader we go with. Administrator being one choice, the system we have in place. Elected executive would be another option, or returning to the chairman as as CEO model. Even though you say you haven't decided yet, can you kind of walk us through your pros and cons and where you might be leaning? And that's the question for both people.
Well, a lot of money was spent on that study. Upwards like 75, 80,000, I believe. Now, it's my understanding when you pay for research like that, you should use it for some sort of guidance. It just shouldn't be a piece of paper that collects dust someplace. Otherwise, it's a complete waste of money. The study feels that, that is the route to go. I think
that being administrator.
Administrator, I'm
Right,
sorry, yes.
right, yeah.
So I would probably be inclined, to consider an administrator if it was the proper fit. And I think some fine tuning needs to be made in the attention to the details, clarity of the contract, and most of all, job description. Because I think when it comes down to it, job description and what they do, what they don't do, who are they responsible to, who do they report to, and who reports to them directly is the most important part. Because attending the meetings all summer, that seemed to be where the gray area was. Who was going to who? And I just feel that's what needs to be clarified. That I would probably be willing to give that another shot, but I'm also willing to listen because I've only heard one side of it. I'm not closed-minded on it.
Thank you, Mr. Darrow. Ms. Nightengale, which structure do you like?
I think that the study that was done in 2016, 2017 with an expert consultant who decided on an administrator as a form of government is something that we need to go back and look at carefully. And then we also need to look at how that administrator is able to do her or his job and how the county government interacts with that administrator's job, meaning the county legislators and potential issues of micromanaging. There is in any organization an organizational chart of top-down or down-up for reporting. And I think that legislators need to let an administrator do her or his job and let department heads report to that administrator, and then let the administrator report to the legislator with the opportunity for legislators, of course, to have open dialogue with the with the administrator. I think that an elected position is a slippery slope. It puts us in the potential of an unstable, changing government. It puts us in the position of voters who may be voting based on party line versus what the actual candidates can bring in terms of leadership, supervision, and fiscal management skills in this $6 billion budget agency, company. I think also that the chair form of government, again, puts us in a position of instability and potential change, and puts a lot of pressure on one person in a part-time way.
Thank you. Mr. Darrow, did you have a follow-up or no? No? So just so that you know, if you're just tuning in to this forum, this is a forum for the 10th Legislative District in the City of Auburn for the Cayuga County Legislature. This is a district that is in the northwest section of the City of Auburn. We have Jeremy Boyer asking questions of both candidates. They are Heidi Nightengale, who is on the Democratic and Working Families Party line, and Edward Darrow, who's on the Republican, Conservative, and Independent line. Mr. Boyer.
Okay. In terms of the issue of micromanaging and just the communication lines and the chain of command, so to speak, with an administrator position, I'd like to get a sense of if you're on the legislature, to what degree and how would you handle day-to-day issues if they come your way? So if you can kind of give your thoughts on that, perhaps just thinking through a scenario where you're approached by an employee in a department who is upset with their boss, or maybe it's a resident in the district who is upset with an employee in the county. As a legislator, what are your next steps in working through that issue?
Okay, I believe this goes to Ms. Nightingale first.
First of all, I would always have an open door. But if someone came to me, for instance, from the county, a county employee, I would advise them that there is a chain for them to work through, and that we also have a very well-qualified human resources director now with great skills that one may, depending on the issue, want to work with first and meet with. But I would also keep an open door and a phone number ready for constituents, for members of District 10 to always be in touch with me so that I'm listening and bringing issues to department heads and the administrator according to what I'm hearing. I believe that there is an importance in maintaining a comprehensive and cogent and reliable sense of talking and its direction from one issue to where it goes next. And I would help those individuals to understand the steps to take next if something came to me directly from a county employee. And certainly the same would happen if I had questions from a constituent.
Thank you, Ms. Nightingale. Mr. Darrow?
Well, again, it completely depends on the complaint, employee, a constituent, and of course, an employee could be a constituent. That's conceivably possible. With an employee, those become delicate matters depending upon what the complaint is, being anything from unfair treatment to sexual harassment. So there are certain procedures in place depending upon what that complaint is. And of course, with proper training, you follow those procedures and protocols that are in place when handling employees. If it's just service problems or plowed streets or rudeness at DMV or something along that line, I would, of course, take the best route and, contact the department head and along with the chair of that committee so that a couple people know. Because I always feel it's always better when two people or so know. That way, things don't tend to get kicked under the carpet. And I'm of that generation, I guess, where you don't want to see things get kicked under the carpet. You'd like to see things addressed so that I can, in a timely manner, get back to whoever got in touch with me and say, well, this is what I found out. This is, it'll be addressed. And, say if it was rudeness, they'll, be counseled and, maybe not be so rude or, and a lot of it is some things can be verified, some things can't. And perhaps your idea of rudeness and my idea of rudeness are two different things. So a lot of things come into play there.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of, let's assume we do decide to have an administrator and we go find one, would you loop the administrator into all these follow-up conversations, or is that too high level to do, or you know what I mean? Just your thoughts, both of you, on sort of when and how to go through the administrator.
Okay, so that'll be a 2-minute question, and
Sure.
we'll start with Mr. Darrow.
A 2-minute question with
Or 2 minutes answer.
Absolutely. If there is
however
an
you want to do it. That's,
if there is an administrator in place, of course, he would need to be copied on whatever is going on, because he needs to know what's going on, but I don't think the administrator needs to be bothered with every little detail when he's running a county the size of Cayuga County and handling a budget the size of Cayuga counties. That's what I think gets overbearing on him, and that's why I think, it gets to a point where it gets frustrating when they're bothered with every little minute detail that they don't need to be bothered with.
okay. Ms. Nightengale?
I think it's important if such complaints or issues or questions came to my attention and I was directly involved and sat down with a person, that I would make recommendations if they had to be made to the Human Resources Department. But I would also actively reach out to department heads first. It's not something that I would race to the administrator, because I agree with Mr. Darrow. This is not something that an administrator needs to be micromanaging. We have very, very qualified department heads who have systems in place and policy and best practices in place to help both constituents and county employees to resolve problems.
Hopefully this is a short follow-up for both of you. Would you ever be in a position where you feel like you needed to give direction to a department head, tell them this is what you need to do?
Okay, we'll make this 1 minute, and we'll start with Mrs. Nightengale on this one.
I think that the first thing to do is to meet with the department head, give them the scenario and the issue, and then have a collaborative conversation, and using my long skill set in supervision and leadership of agencies as large as supervising 76 employees myself, working with that skill set to help them to understand the problem and how they may approach it going forward.
Okay. Mr. Darrow, just 1 minute
I feel
response.
that's an excellent question, and my response is absolutely not. I do not know their employees. I do not know their department. I do not know their skill set. I would never, ever begin to try and tell a department head how they should manage an employee, how they should discipline an employee. That is for them, Human Resources, or the county administrator, if we should have one, to make that decision. That is not my call, or should it ever be a legislator's call.
You'll have 1 minute for a follow-up.
Yeah, I would like to respond to what Mr. Darrow has just said in terms of maybe not understanding what I was expressing in terms of going to a department head. As I said, my point would be to inform them, possibly let them know if this is an issue that they could bring to Human Resources, but also to just work collaboratively in the event that I had a skill set that could help them understand the problem, so that they then take the work and do the work following there. I, as a legislator, I'm a policy, I would be a policy maker and not someone who's micromanaging day-to-day operations.
Okay. Mr. Darrow, you'll have 1 minute as well.
I just thought it was perfectly clear that she would like to suggest to them what they should or shouldn't do to that employee. So,
Well, now, Mr. Boyer.
Okay. In terms of you both alluded to the CGR report, or the $75,000 assessment of Cayuga County government. It did recommend the administrator form, but it also had it was 98 pages, I believe, so it had a lot of other material in there, some of which some changes have already been adopted and being evaluated as to how effective they are. The question I had is basically how much should we continue to use that in terms of implementing more changes, or is that basically limited to just looking at the overall administrative form of government?
Okay, I think we're back to Mr. Darrow. You have 2 minutes on this subject.
it's quite a document. It's about as thrilling as reading the Wall Street Journal. There are many good ideas in there, particularly when it comes to some department merging, some resourcing, some means of pulling departments together for saving money, cost cutting. But I think it really needs to be looked at more thoroughly. I believe that enough time hasn't been spent, perhaps, in a group discussing it. And yet again, I haven't been at every single meeting or caucus, so I don't know if certain individuals have gotten together to discuss it. But I still think there's plenty of good ideas in there that can be instrumented and we can take advantage of for more cost cutting, more savings, more shared services, and perhaps even some that'll bring us back some more of the state tax credits that are available under the shared services program. But it needs to be looked at. It can't be used as a paperweight.
Okay. On the issue of CGR and how long is it valid for, Ms. Nightengale?
I think the report continues to be something we should look at as a valid report for consideration and study. I believe that indeed it is a long report that gives us more information beyond the administrator decision form of government. It gives us processes and ideas around the importance of shared services. It's certainly a time for collaborative work that has shown to be effective in many other areas of our collaboration between county government and city government. So I believe the document should indeed be considered valid, should by legislators continue to be looked at closely, and in the end, it comes down to what we need for leadership and not politics.
Mr. Darrow, you'll have 1 minute to follow up.
I'm anxiously awaiting for the book on CD version to come out.
Oh. Anything else to contribute?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Boyer.
All right. I wanted to get your thoughts on the county, the proposition that's on the ballot this year. Voters won't just be picking a new legislator. They'll decide yes or no on a measure that would do some things to set up the county for potential redistricting. Essentially, the question, I'll try my best to simplify it, but it would create a 2-year term starting in 2020 for that class of legislators, and then followed up with everyone being on the same cycle of 4-year terms, limiting to 3 4-year terms. So the question is yes or no. Hopefully, can you give us how you plan to vote and why?
Ms. Nightengale, we'll go with you first. You don't have to just say yes or no. You've got 2 minutes.
Well, I do plan to vote yes. I think that redistricting has a very important future play for the county. Right now, we have legislators who have weighted votes. And I believe in one person, one vote. But I also believe that we have a lot of information yet to come out of the 2020 census to help us understand what redistricting may be needed or what it will look like. So I think we've got some research and time to look at that, but my vote will be yes. And that will be based on the idea that the weighted vote creates some unfairness for all of the county constituents, and that I believe in one person, one vote.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Nightengale. Mr. Darrow.
I am honestly so undecided on that right now. I constantly keep going back and forth thinking about it. Looking at the pros and cons, I truly do think that we do need to look at redistricting. And I do truly believe that we need to get away from the weighted vote, that we need to have one vote for one. But I don't like the fact that if we were to stay, say, at all 15 districts, that once that happens, all 15 would be coming up at once. I don't like the thought of that. If there was a way that after, just then, I was at the meeting when they mulled this over for an hour. And the wording of it, they mulled over. And the county attorney, they rephrased it, I can't tell you how many times, to try and get it right. But I think it would work if we were able, after, to go back to the 4-year terms staggered with odd and even. Then I think it would work and work well. But we still need to keep, and this is one of the big things, the 12-year term limit, because I'm a firm believer in that. I think that works, so no person gets stagnant in the seat. So I hope that answered your question, but...
Yeah, undecided, right?
Well,
at this
yes,
point.
but there's so many pros and cons either way.
And those are the reasons. Yeah.
And I have a feeling on Election Day it's going to come down to that when I fill in the ballot,
that
unfortunately.
Gut feeling, yeah. Got it.
You have 1 minute to follow up if you like.
I'd just like to follow up with, yes, there are concerns about the fact that the way this will be organized at first is that there would be a new set of legislators every 4 years instead of staggered legislators. I believe in the staggering, and I believe that we can work together to create a plan after the proposition goes through to appropriately in the future create a staggering system of timeframes for election.
Mr. Boyer, we have time for most likely 2 more questions.
Okay, well, let's try to make sure we address water quality concerns, because Owasco Lake and its health and preserving safe, clean drinking water continues to be a major priority for everyone. One of the huge things that's in the middle of coming out is revisions to the rules and regulations of the watershed. The county legislature will get a say on that. There is a draft out on that. I'd like to hear your thoughts on, do you see yourself supporting that draft as it is? Or are there big changes that you would like to see before you could support it? Just kind of taking a look at that issue.
We're starting with Mr. Darrow. You have 2 minutes on this.
The watershed is very, very important to me. The actual draft I haven't seen yet, but it is so important to me that Tuesday, after the Soil and Water Conservation meeting at City Hall, myself and Tom Adess have made arrangements to go out with Greg Kierst and another inspector and a couple of technicians, and he's taken us around Owasco Lake and other tributaries to show us what he's doing, what they're doing to prevent, what they're doing to enforce, what they look for. And I'm doing this because I want to be more educated about our watershed and what the problems are. Because, yeah, I know, we have phosphate problems going in. We have nitrogen problems going in. Those all are part of the reasons for the blue-green algae, the algae blooms. We have some old, neglected septic systems that leach down in. They cause problems. So these gentlemen that Tom and I are going to go with on Tuesday, I feel are going to be a wealth of knowledge to us, to help better educate us, to help us become better legislators. So if we know what the problems are, and we know what's causing the problems, and I truly believe we just can't look at Owasco Lake. Cayuga Lake is also a tributary and drinking water, and it has many tributaries into it for Cayuga County. So it's important that we look at all of it. We have to look at the whole picture. And that's why I want to become more educated on what's going on and what's going into Owasco Lake, Cayuga Lake, Skinny Atlas Lake, because we have shoreline of Skinny Atlas Lake in this county. And a lot of people don't realize that. So I think it's important that we find out and address it then. And at that point, I'll be able to make a better decision on the new rules and regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Darrow. Ms. Nightengale.
Well, I and all of my neighbors are concerned about water quality. Water is critical to all of us, and so is the health of Owasco Lake and its watershed. We in Auburn and many of our neighboring towns get our drinking water from the lake. And I personally enjoy, in the past, kayaking with my family, as do other people in the district, and enjoying the lake that way. So water in the lake are major economic drivers for industry, farming, tourism, and quality of life. Much has been done, but we need to do more. I am and will continue to be focused on the issue and will work tirelessly to improve and restore water quality. While I live in the Auburn and represent the Auburn district, I am also aware that water issues are larger than the Owasco watershed and will be aware of the need to include all of our watersheds in our efforts, including Cayuga Lake. So much collaboration has already happened between the county, business, farms, the communities, just to name a few. And it's critical that as we continue, we need to look at that kind of collaborative leadership. We have the Water Quality Management Agency, the Owasco Watershed Management Council, which is actually a model. Canandaigua is looking at our council as a model now because we have combined county, city, towns, villages into a 501c3 not-for-profit, which allows us to bring in monies that are grant monies and state monies to help with the harmful algal blooms outside of increasing costs to the county budget.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer, you're going to get a 1-minute question.
One short question.
Very short.
The legislature in 2018, I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, it took effect this year, voted to raise the annual base pay for legislators from $10,100 to $13,500. Two pretty straightforward questions related to that. One, would you have voted yes in favor of that increase? And two, do you think there should be another increase to follow up with that?
We'll start with Ms. Nightengale. You'll have 1 minute.
If I was a legislator at the time, I would not have voted for the increase. And going forward, I think that the job is well paid for at this point, and I would not advocate for increases in pay.
Mr. Darrow, 1 minute on this issue of the new salary and an increase.
Quite honestly, it's hard to say what I would have done 2 years ago. I don't think anybody runs for this office for the money. You're doing it because you want to get involved. You're doing it for the love of it. I think the pay raise was, what, $3,000 you just said?
10-1 to 13-5.
Yeah, so it's not like it was an astronomical amount, but you don't do this for the money. You do this for the love of it. Exact same reason I've been on the Zoning Board of Appeals since 1992, when Guy Cosentino appointed me, and I've served under every mayor since. I don't get paid. I do it for the love of it. 27 years, no money involved. You do it for the love.
Okay. Mr. Boyer, thanks for the questions.
Thank you.
We're going to now turn to the closing statements. As we said, we're going to reverse order from what we did at the beginning. Mr. Darrow, who is on the Republican, Conservative, and Independent lines, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone present for the hospitality this evening and the questions. Believe it or not, it's been very informative. I'm running on the platform of we need to run the county like a business. We need to hold those accountable. And accountability really does matter. I have 32 years of business experience, and I believe it's been very successful. I have 20 years of experience with the City of Auburn on zoning, which I feel is very, very helpful and makes me uniquely qualified, as I said before, to help interact between the county and the city to help get things done and help our constituents in District 10. And I am very proud that I was appointed by Mayor Quill, a Democrat, to the Sparks Auburn Board as an advisor. And I feel a lot of good things have happened downtown, and we're making a real good comeback. I pledge to do what I can and be available anytime a constituent needs me. I'd appreciate your vote, and everything I've said tonight comes from the heart. You haven't noticed me read from any notes or any prepared statements, because I mean it, and I want to be your legislator, and I will appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Darrow. We'll now hear from Heidi Nightengale, who's on the Democratic and Working Families Party lines. Ma'am.
As you've heard tonight, I stand for advancing the quality of life for all, and especially for working families. I intend to utilize my seasoned organization and team leadership skills to assist in widening the net of essential health and human services and monitoring our county's budget and spending. My sharp, actually superior fiscal management analysis skill set will work toward the legislator's ability to maintain a balanced budget and a tax cap. I'll push for collaboration across aisles and across service systems to meet these needs. Consolidation and collaboration have proven to be unwaveringly effective and efficient. And this is an important time for effective and efficient county governance. My neighbors are counting on that. We have challenges ahead of us, which require strong law enforcement presence and collaboration. We have challenges which will require close collaboration with the City of Auburn. And I have the relationships with both in a long-term way to bring this to the forefront of change for working families in District 10. I will work toward workforce development, and especially in the industry-able and ready District of 10. I champion the wonderful small businesses that have helped the district to shine in the past several years, small businesses which remain vulnerable without continued attention and support, however. And finally, and importantly, I promise to support the work of the Owasco Watershed Council, an excellent example of county, city, town, village collaboration to work out research-based long-term solutions to water protection. I've worked in our community for 30 years. I have sat on boards for 30 years. And again, this is because it's hard work, but it's my heart work. And thank you for your time tonight, for your questions, for your interest in our county. This forum is an example of good citizenship and the kind of citizenship that I will shepherd as the legislator for District 10.
Thank you, Ms. Nightingale. I want to thank you both for joining us this afternoon and tonight to share your views with the voters of the 10th Legislative District. We know it's not always easy to do that, so we thank you for that. We thank Mr. Boyer for his thoughtful questions as always. He and I will be back here on Tuesday with the next forum for the 12th District. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But right now we would like to thank you as well for tuning in and urge you to pay attention to the campaigns. Go out and vote on November 5th. Early voting does start on the 26th, which is a Saturday, and there are several days before that you can go vote in the city of Auburn, as well as if you're a county voter, you can go in Conquest and Venice. We'd like to remind you that there is a ballot proposition on the back of the, on the ballot as well regarding term limits, which you've heard about tonight. On Tuesday, we'll be back this week with the 12th Legislative District. That is another open seat. Incumbent Pat Mahunik has decided not to seek re-election. He is adhering to the 3-term limit, and that race is between Thomas Odessa, who will face off, who's a Republican, against Democrat Trish Otley Kerr. And that district covers the southeast section of the city of Auburn. On Thursday the 17th, we will have the final in our legislative forums for the 14th Legislative District, which includes the southwest side of the city of Auburn, and that is where incumbent Republican Majority Leader Michael Didio is seeking a 3rd term against Democrat Gwen Weber-McLeod. In 2 weeks, we will have the candidates for the Auburn City Council on Tuesday, followed by that Thursday, we'll have on the 24th, we'll have the candidates for Cayuga County District Attorney, and then we'll finish up the following Monday with the race for mayor. Because of the number of forums we have this year, the Citizen on their website, auburnpub.com, will have these forums donated very quickly, and we're in the process of doing the same on YouTube. The Auburn Regional Media Access, ARMA, will run this forum this Saturday and Sunday on Spectrum 12 and 98 and Fios 31, starting at 6 o'clock. And the college's radio station, WDWN 89.1, will also air them on Saturday morning. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. We want to thank you for watching. We hope you have a good night and have a great tomorrow, and we will see you back here in the studio on Tuesday for the 12th District. And so just so you know, you're still on for a moment.